What's included with the pattern? So I have a notes section and the YouTube tutorial will be here, and all that's required is on the back of the pattern. You've got a 12-page instruction. You've got the applique pieces for the sewing machine, the applique letters, and also an applique layout key. The first thing I like to do is get all of my fabrics cut so then I can get ready and start sewing. So on page 2, cut each fabric as I suggest. These are all the fabric pieces all done and cut, and these are the applique pieces. They've all been reversed, as you can see. Now you have an option. You can trace around these with a light box with the Steam-A-Seam that I recommend, or you can actually cut your Steam-A-Seam and run it through your printer. One of the problems with doing that with your printer is that some of the ink will actually rub off because it's kind of like a waxy paper. I'm going to run it through my printer, but just because it's quicker, and when we're doing the letters, it's a little bit more straighter as well. So I'm going to cut some Steam-A-Seam and put that through the printer. However, if you were to do this with a light box and trace, you can actually save your Steam-A-Seam, because I'm having to print all of these letters as they are on the sheets. However, you can just move your Steam-A-Seam around and you can save on that Steam-A-Seam. You will have to cut your Steam-A-Seam down to a paper size that will go through your printer. So I have done that. Just remember, don't touch the ink or limit how much you're touching the ink because it will smudge. So let's get through to the next part. I like to start with the sewing machine, and I also have my applique layout key. I'm going to take my paper scissors. I'm going to cut away the sewing machine so it's free from everybody else. We're not cutting on the line. Make sure that you're not cutting on the line. I've got my teal section here, and we're going to take one part of the adhesive off of the Steam-A-Seam. So what you may find is that your adhesive might be on the wrong side. We want the adhesive to be on this side of our paper where our template is. I find it easier if you just press it against your thumb, move that piece of paper back, and then that'll take the adhesive away from the wrong side of the paper that I don't want it to be on. Pull that away. Stick that to the wrong side of your fabric. Look, have you seen how it's smudging? So just be careful, just pat it down. And this is what my hands are going to end up looking like. So I'm going to put that to one side. So it's really up to you. You can use your light box and mark it out with a pencil, or you can print it out. The printed way is obviously the quicker way because you're not having to do all of that tracing out. So I'm going to leave that up to you. You're going to refer back to page 2 of where all of these different parts go to. Another problem is that you may struggle to see the letters on the Steam-A-Seam, so you may have to just have a look at the letters on here to revert back to which letters are on here. So this is what my hands look like. Like I said, it smudges a lot when you run it through the printer. You may want to just trace it with a light box. The next thing we want to do is adhere the Steam-A-Seam to the fabric. So just follow the instructions. And now you're going to get a pair of scissors and you're going to cut around the outline now, staying on the line and cutting the whole section out. I have this silicone mat and I'm going to cut and build as I go. So I'm going to take away the paper back in here, and that will reveal the adhesive on this side of the sewing machine. So I'm just going to put this down like so. On page 6 of my instructions, I give you the order in which everything gets placed. My spatula from my Cricut comes in really handy for this. I'm just going to take the paper off here. So the whole point of Steam-A-Seam is that it's repositionable, so you can lift things up, move things about until you're committed with where you want everything. So just going to put this handle here. You want everything to overlap because you want everything to attach to each other like a little bit like a sticker. That's my buttons in place. I'm going to do, let's do the big yellow button before I do the other pink one. And I can put this button central to the yellow one. Then we've got the sewing machine needle. You can't really go too small with the sewing machine needle because you need to get that backing off the back. There you go. Got it. Then I'll just use that spatula again to figure out where I want to put that needle. It's sticking to my finger. There we go. You can decide how long you want that needle to be. If it's too long, you can just take a little bit off. Do my little dials to hold my needles into place. Put my needle plate on. Then I'm just going to put my thread in. I'm just going to put my cat. Heyo. Now I'm going to place a wool pressing mat underneath my silicone mat. You can also do this with a Teflon sheet, by the way. And I'm going to press this all down, and this all will be one, like it's going to be like a sticker. So all these little moving parts will all be attached together. So I also need to get a pressing mat on top of this. My silicone mat came with a Teflon sheet. We are going to get our iron, and then we're going to press this all down so it'll be one piece. So I'm going to get this spatula again, and then we can take this all off and everything will all come off as one. Nothing's going to fall off. And it still has adhesive on it, so we're going to attach that now to the front of our wall hanging. This is the wall hanging section. We want to find the center of our wall hanging, so we're going to finger press and then finger press. That creates a cross hatch then, so you know where to place your sewing machine. So this is the center here. You can do the same thing with your sewing machine, just kind of fold it in half slightly and just find the center of your sewing machine piece, and then you can lay that down into place. Don't press this down just yet because we want to sort our lettering out. So we're going to do the same thing with our letters. We're going to cut these all out and press them into fabric. These are all your letters. Don't worry about what goes where. Cut them out. Remember, you're not cutting around each letter yet. Going to use your paper scissors, and then we're just going to cut each of these out. As we did before, take a piece of fabric, take a letter, make sure the adhesive is on the template side so we can trace around the letter. Lightly press it down because it's going to smudge on you. Unless there is a Steam-A-Seam that is printable. Maybe I should have checked out. And just go through and put all of the letters onto your fabric. You're going to once again press all these into place onto your fabric. Okay, so I'm going to get this R and I'm going to start to cut around it. Now I use my big fabric scissors to cut the majority away, and then I'll come in with my smaller scissors and cut around, especially for that central part. So I'm just going to stick the sharp side in and then cut around the opening of that R. And then cut around that R like so. Keep all the paper attached for the time being. Put the one that you've finished to one side and start on the next letter. For this next part, you want to make sure that everything is lined up straight, because we're going to do a straight line. And the best way of doing this is just put it on your cutting mat if you've got something big enough, and just lining it up with them 1-inch squares to make sure that everything is nice and straight. On page 6 is going to be all the information that you need in order to figure out where you're going to be placing these lines. So I'm just going to do a line with a friction pen. These friction pens are brilliant because you can iron them out. So I'm going to do a line all the way across. I've made sure it's straight. And I just want to make sure that line is getting on that fabric. There we go. Another thing that I like to do is fold this in half and marking that half at the top of my wall hanging there. Just a little one at the top and the bottom. Go through all your letters to find out the word forever. We're going to start with the letter F and the letter R. Place them into their placement areas. Once I have the F and the R in, I'll just start filling the words in between, leaving a bit of a gap. So I'm taking off that back sticky paper and I'm just going to start placing everything down. Once again, we're going to follow the directions on page 6 on where to put this next line. Just make sure that everything is straight so you don't end up with a wonky line and wonky words, which you don't want. And then I'm going to draw that line again for the placement of my next word. And I just want to make sure that my friction pen's making a mark. There we go. We're going to get that word sewing into place. We're going to place it where I tell you in the instructions. I'm going to mark my next line for the bottom of my sewing machine. Once again, I'm going to put the H and the K into place and then work them letters in between. And this is the last line all into place. Now you're going to double check, make sure everything is how you want it to look and it's all in line, and then you're going to press once again with an iron and that will permanently fix it to the fabric. So make sure you double check before and that the spelling is okay, and then we'll move on to the next stage. I'm going to spray some 505 spray, and that's basically an adhesive, a spray adhesive for fabric. And then I'm going to put the top of my quilt perfectly on top of that. And that adhesive will just temporarily keep everything in place while I'll go ahead and do my applique. Spend your time just getting that all nice and flat before we start free motion quilting. So basically what I'm going to do is, I like to call it thread painting. I'm going to go around each of the words and the sewing machine, but this time I'm going to do it all in the same colour. My previous one, when I was doing my mock-up for this, and I'll show you, I did it all just using black thread. I love this, but for this next one, I'm going to do it where it's just using the same colour, so it's going to blend in. So I'll be using my Baby Lock Tiara 3. It is a mid-arm and it basically just does free motion quilting. I have a glide in my thread and in my bobbin. I have the micro quilting foot attached to my machine just because I can see things much better than using that closed circular foot. I find it easier to have my gloves on, and then I'm just going to start quilt. So what I'm going to do is literally just go around these letters, and I'm going to go around each letter twice. I'm going to do all these letters and I'll meet you back here when I'm done. And you can do this using your sewing machine. Just drop the feed dogs down and get quilting. Once we've got all of this quilted, we are then going to put the back in onto the back of the wall hanging. Once again, I'm going to just use some 505 spray, and I'm going to stick the back in to the back. I'm going to make sure that everything is nice and flat, and I'm going to start from the centre and just start doing a simple meander all the way around this. So I'm going to go from the centre out. Now that everything is free motion quilted, I am going to square it up, and that is on page 7 of the instructions. Now we're going to put this to one side and concentrate on the binding. You're going to have 3 strips of binding and you're going to have to attach them all together. So you're going to place one going across, one going up and down, and then you're going to sew a line going across here. I'll be using the Baby Lock Altair 2. It's a sewing and embroidery machine. So then I can just press sewing once this is done and switch it over to sewing. I'm also going to put my guide on for this. So as you can see, there is now a beam going across. This really does help when doing binding. I love this feature. See, I don't bother to mark any lines anymore because I'm just going to follow this laser beam all the way down. Oh, 1 second here. It's gone out of place. Line this back up. Push it down. And I just want to make sure I finish on that corner. So I'm going to press. It has a thread cutter on the machine, and then I open it out and it's got a perfect mitre. So I'm going to do that again on this next one. You're going to have 3 strips. I've joined them all together, and you want to take off this chunky bit here. So you're just going to cut about 1/4 inch off, and do the same here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half and making sure that you're doing it so you're hiding that raw seam. That is all pressed down, and then we're going to get our wall hanging. I'm going to keep about a 7-inch excess here, and then I am going to start sewing about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches in from the longest side. And I'm going to do 1/4 inch and sew that into place and stop just a little bit before the end here. So I like to attach from the back of the quilt, and then what we're going to do here is lift this up and then fold it back on itself. and then stitch all the way down, and then just stopping a little bit before we get to this end here. We're going to do the same thing around all corners, and you're going to stop at the very last one because we don't want to sew all the way to the end of our join. Sew the last corner and then sew again about 5 inches in. I use this binding tool all the time because it makes everything so much easier. The link will be in the description box down below. So the arrow wants to be pointing this way, and then it's got markings for 2 1/4, 2 1/2, etc, etc. So you're going to fold this part over the top, and then just make sure that this is on the end here, and then you're going to fold the left hand side over like so. So basically you'll cut at that 2 1/2 inch. Need to get a pair of scissors. So now what you need to do is the binding on the right hand side is going to go up, and the binding on the left hand side is going to go from left to right, and you're going to make sure them 2 creases are right sides together. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sew across these 2, where my thumbs are, you're going to sew right across there. Then once again you're going to cut the bulk off. I have so many tutorials on binding on my channel, by the way, so if you need something that's more in-depth, then you can watch one of them. And then what you're going to do is sew in place. You see how it just lays flat perfectly? I just love it. Now you're going to get yourself some window clips, and you are going to fold that over to the front. I prefer to fold over to the front and hand stitch onto the front because I've got more control of that corner. That's generally the trickiest part of any binding. So I will just clip everything into place and then hand stitch. On the hanging sleeve, you are going to fold 1/4 inch and fold it over again, enclosing all of the raw edges on both sides. Take that over to your sewing machine and stitch into place. Now you're going to fold in half and press. You're going to do that wrong sides together, open it up, and then you're going to press this side down. Then you're going to fold the other part into the center like so and press. Open it up, and you are going to sew wrong sides together all the way down. Then you're going to open it up. You're going to press these seams open, but be careful not to press any of these seams that we've pressed here. Just be very careful. You might be able to finger press it. You might be able to just get a little roller and roll that open. We are now going to ignore this center seam here. So we're going to have this seam here and then this seam here. So you should have 2 nicely pressed seams. And then this is supposed to look like that because when we actually sew it onto the back of our wall hanging, we want a bit of a give for that rod that goes through. So now we have finished the binding, we want to attach the hanging to the back of the quilt. Obviously this bit wants to go to the back, and you don't want to do it right at the top. I'm going to keep a layer of 1 dots going down here, and then I'm going to pin all the way around, keeping this into place. Remember that we want that give on that sleeve for that rod, and I'm also going to pin this down as well because when I put the rod through, I don't want to mistakenly do it underneath here. So this part here is going to get pinned down, and I will sew that into place as well. So there you go. Start to hand sew, and don't forget, you're not going to go all the way through the front. You need to just catch it just a little bit. Don't go through to the front. So this is what it looks like on my other wall hanging that's finished. When I push that up, it doesn't go over the binding. You don't want your hanging to go over where your binding is. I've cut a dowel rod 16 inches. I have these eyelets that you get from the hardware store. Got them in this thing here. I'm going to get my electric drill and I'm going to drill a pilot hole into both ends. It just makes it easier. You don't need to go all the way down with your pilot hole, you just need to get it started, and then you can screw in these, they're called screw eyes. Ever since I had cancer and chemo, I have a problem with my twist, so I'm just going to get a tool to help me with this. And this one as well. So I'm going to place my dowel rod through there, and then I'm going to get my fishing wire. I always I pull off more than I need, and then I can tie it up. So I'm going to do it at each end and tie a few knots in it. And then you'll do that on the other end as well. And then you can hang your wall hanging up. So I personally still prefer the one with the black thread. What do you think? Do you prefer the one where it's a bit more muted, or the black thread one? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy the pattern. It was so much fun. Bye bye.